In honor of my 10th year in this childcare business entrepreneurship journey, I recently released a podcast episode discussing how I feel and how I've felt over the years about my experience throughout the last decade operating childcare programs. Something that I failed to include, which I figured could be of interest to you, are things that I have worried about. Stay with me. I know that it is not good to worry, but I do think it is interesting to understand, especially if you're in startup mode or thinking about starting a childcare business. I figured that it would be at least interesting to some to know about things that could heighten very briefly some anxiety or cause some stress or some worry. Everything is not all glitz and glamour. I don't think anybody thinks that it is, but it's not always perfect. And there are times that we worry as childcare business leaders. And I figured that I would list some of those occasions, no matter how silly they might sound. A few years back, I hosted a webinar where I shared 3 mistakes to avoid when you're starting up your childcare business. And thousands of people watched the replay for that webinar, which you can too. It's on my YouTube channel and I will link it in the description below. But it was very well received. Now, while it is possible to avoid certain mistakes, because the more you know, just because you have a plan to do the right thing does not mean that things will always go according to that plan, unfortunately. While you should prepare for the unexpected at all times, I believe it's best not to worry. Get everything in order, keep your program in compliance, make sure you have insurance, and have faith that all things will go well. With that said, I'm going to share a few things that I have worried about over the years so you don't have to. Now, this list is in no particular order of significance or importance. The number one priority that I always have in the back of my mind is child safety. No matter how many years I've been doing this, from day one to today, I'm always not worried about the safety of the children in our care, but it is something that is a priority to me. And it used to be something that I worried about. But now that we have qualified staff in place and great procedures down packed and directors that are knowledgeable on health and safety and the compliance, and I'm not worried about it, but it is still something that is in the back of my mind, but that's not the type of stuff I'm talking about in this video. I'm going to be listing other types of little things that seem silly but feel big in the moment. In no particular order, just things that I can remember from the beginning of me starting out in childcare as a home daycare provider up until now as a multi-site. I own 4 childcare centers, and some of these worries still exist on occasion. First and foremost, my very first worry as a new childcare business owner back in 2014, when I was in the process of starting up my group family daycare program in Queens, New York, I was worried about actually charging the tuition rate that I knew my childcare service was worth. I thought that if I put anything close to not only what I thought was fair, but what I needed to sustain and to pay my rent and to pay my bills and to pay myself, like if I charged anything close to that nobody was gonna sign up. And that is just not true at all. Clearly, I'm here to tell you 10 years later, with so much growth later, that charge what you're worth, charge what you want your program to be worth, and then make your program quality level up to those standards so that you can charge more. Parents that value you, parents that value your program, they're gonna pay it. Charge what you're worth. Number 2 is a silly one. As a home daycare provider, I was worried that parents would be coming up to my door before I was ready to answer it. So as you know, if you are a home daycare provider or are thinking about it, you're providing childcare in the home that you live in 9 times out of 10, more than likely. And that was the case for me. I was living in this house that I was renting for the purpose of daycare, but I was living there as well. And I remember being worried because I had one parent in particular that would love to wait outside. Like, it would be, I opened at 6:30 and he would be outside from 6 a.m. And sometimes he would come and ring the doorbell at 6:15 or 6:20, sometimes 6:10, sometimes 6 o'clock. And then one day he had the nerve to just ask me, could you just accept her at 5:30? And of course, I said yes, and I shouldn't have. But that is something that I worried about. Having parents show up and ringing my doorbell at all hours of the morning. Sometimes I would wake up a little bit early, like a few minutes earlier than I normally would, and I would just dread the feeling of knowing that there is a parent outside. And maybe it's just I was being too nice, because I was, but yeah, didn't like that feeling of me being in my pajamas, not even brushed my teeth yet, and there's already somebody waiting for me outside. Don't rush me. The third thing that I used to worry about, was preparing meals. When I first started in my home daycare, I was very against cooking for the kids. I didn't even cook for myself. At this point, like when I first started my home daycare, I was going into my senior year of my undergraduate studies. I was 20 years old, still in college. Before that, I was either eating from home, like what my parents cooked or what we got as a family, or what I ordered out with my roommates, or from when I was living on campus at the time. What was it called? Is it called food hall? The cafeteria? I don't know. But yeah, I was not cooking. I did not learn how to cook for a while. And I remember when I first started, parents were asking like, oh, do you provide lunch? Do you provide breakfast? Do you provide this, that? And I'd straight up be like, no. I was genuinely frightened to cook for the children. And it took one of the kids' parents. And it wasn't even something that I thought was an issue, honestly. My only issue was that I didn't want to cook for the kids. I was worried about them either not liking the food or getting sick from my food. I wasn't worried that like parents would not choose to enroll with me, until a parent asked me, I guess she really wanted to have her daughter in my program, and she was just like, why aren't you providing lunch? It's not that hard. And she kind of checked me on the fact that it should be very easy to make meals for 2- and 3-year-olds. And eventually I did. I gave in. I hired at the time that because I believe at that time I was by myself and providing the care most of the time. So eventually, once I started getting more help, I was able to spend more time in the kitchen figuring out how to cook. I know how to cook now. That was 10 years ago. Please don't come for me too hard in the comments. Number 4, telling families no. It didn't matter what the situation was. I literally just did not like saying no to families for anything. I remember I used to offer transportation service once I finally did get employees at my home daycare, and I decided that, okay, now that I have employees, I can step out for a few minutes a day, or just to go run out and pick up children and come back. So I started to do that, and there were parents that would find out about us who wanted to have their child with us, but their kids went to elementary schools that were like 30 minutes away, and I was going to go pick them up. That was a really stupid decision because 30 minutes at dismissal time, 30 minutes distance at dismissal time equals like an hour and a half of travel. On top of that, I've had families that just lived far that wanted me to do pickups and drop-offs. And if we're talking about that amount of time today, like when I have multiple vehicles and a transportation team and a transportation manager and like a team, that's a bit different. But I was the team. Especially when it came to driving, I was the only one doing pickups and drop-offs, and going such far distances was really stupid. That's just an example. But I have definitely had many occasions, even now to this day, where I just don't feel comfortable. I don't like telling a parent no for whatever the situation might be, which is why I have removed myself from having the responsibility of engaging with parents about day-to-day operations. And I've talked about this in other videos before, my podcast before. If you are not subscribed to Childcare Sights and Sounds on your favorite podcast streaming platform, please go ahead, look up Childcare Sights and Sounds and listen to the dozens and dozens of episodes that have already been posted. But anyway, I've talked about on there how essential it is for me to have the role of what we have now as our parent coordinator, so that if there are issues that escalate or parent requests that escalate beyond the director level, there is a barrier there, someone in upper management that can give parents definitive yes or no answers to requests that they might have, or address issues or concerns or complaints. That is not me. And I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, or something that's not common as the owner. Maybe you might feel like, oh, I should be the one to where the buck stops with me. And it does, and for certain things, but for most things, the buck stops with our parent coordinator, because I know that I'm easily a pushover when it comes to parent requests, and that does detriment to the business. So the fifth thing that I will share that I worry about are incidents. Just incidents in general, anything that would need to be reported to somebody else. So whether that is an incident involving a child that we now have to tell parents how that went, or if it's a serious incident that has to be reported to our state licensor. I used to worry about that kind of stuff. I honestly don't now anymore, because I can see how it's going to play out. I have experience with how things like that play out. So it's not that much of a fear for me anymore, although it is still not pleasant, I guess, to experience. Number 6 kind of ties in, I guess, with number 4, which is intimidating parents that try to intimidate. Whether that be me in the past when I was dealing with them directly, or parents that try to intimidate our teachers or directors. It's just, obviously, that you would understand why that's not something that is pleasant to experience, but it was something that I used to worry about. We've got good policies and strong procedures in place now to dismiss families from childcare completely if they do not follow our parent code of conduct. But it was something that I used to worry about. Number 7 is staff call outs. When I was the director, or even like taking it further back to being the on-site provider in my home daycare, my first few employees that I had, I was very worried about staff calling out, especially when it was in the home daycare setting, because it's literally just me and one other person, and that one other person is absolutely required to maintain ratio if more in a home daycare setting, if more than a very small number of kids attends. So if someone calls out, and I'm sure this is a industry-wide, nationwide worry all the time, like especially if you are a center director, a big concern of yours is probably staff call outs, especially if you're operating on a lower budget when it comes to staffing, or just having a hard time finding staffing. That was a lot of my worries in the beginning as well. Kind of tying into that, number 8 is staff arriving late, specifically opening staff. We have certain staff members that have keys to our building, And in the past, over the years, it's not a worry right now. That very rarely does this issue come up now. But in the past, we couldn't quite get right who to make a key holder. So sometimes that person would be responsible for opening the building. And why would certain parents be showing up, knocking on the door before the key holding opener gets there? It was an issue, has been addressed. We have backup plans and backup keys now, but in the past it was a repetitive issue. And I'm thankful that we have passed that stage and have trustworthy long-term employees that hold keys and do well with making sure that they arrive a few minutes early before opening and do all of the procedures. But it always used to make me anxious, like especially when I lived in Philadelphia, and couldn't, even if I wanted to, I couldn't race over to open a door. But sometimes there was occasions where parents would call, and because I have a virtual phone system, I get the calls too. So a parent will call and be like, I'm outside, nobody's coming to the door, or I'll check the camera knowing that, okay, we have a problem with tardiness with our opening staff. Let me make sure she's there or he's there, and they wouldn't be. And then we have parents sitting outside. It was a mess, embarrassing. Please don't judge me. It's been fixed. Number 9 is licensors and inspectors. I used to be terrified. That used to be my worst fear, having to engage with an unexpected, unannounced inspection. Not because we were doing anything wrong. Like I'm definitely not the type of childcare provider to try to hide things or hide kids or like intentionally operate not in compliance. But I think there needs to be a restructuring of the training that takes place as a director, or maybe you just have to pick the right trainer. Because I remember going to like the mandated health and safety trainings, and the trainers that me personally, years ago, I'm not talking about any of our current trainers now who train our directors, because I'm sure those are great, but years ago, I remember going to trainings myself and being told these horror stories, or, just hearing other daycare providers' experiences with their licensors and their inspectors, and how they're after them, or they're retaliating against them, or they're giving them violations for this or that, or they're going to shut their program down. Yes, our programs have received violations. I have experience with getting violations, unfortunately. However, it's not the end of the world, and they do make it seem like it's kind of the end of the world, and it's not. I do think some inspectors can be very like violation happy or pencil happy. I don't know what you would call it, where they're not as lenient or understanding when they could be or probably should be. And not to say that other people's experiences with licensors or inspectors are invalid, but if we treat them with respect and understanding, they usually do the same with us. And we have had a number of different inspectors over the years. I don't know why every couple of years, sometimes in the same year, we get a change in inspector. But it's been fine. So don't worry about your inspectors. Number 10 is telling staff no. That's something that I used to really struggle with, and not as much as with the parents, but definitely telling staff no is an uncomfortable feeling. I'm sure you can understand why, like if they're trying to request time off and you literally have nobody else, or if they want a raise, or if they want certain things for their classroom, or if you're just starting out, it can be hard to fulfill the requests of everybody and make everybody happy, especially if you don't have a lot of make everybody happy money at the time. So That's something to keep in mind. Number 11 is transportation issues. So I did mention that when I was a home daycare provider, I used to provide transportation myself. Once I transitioned to having centers, we started up a transportation component of the services that we provide. And I remember just being in the back of my mind worried often about like, are the drivers going to show up? Are we going to get to the schools on time to pick up kids? Are we going to get to the houses on time? When we release kids when we're taking children home in the evening, is the right person going to be there to accept the child? It's just a lot of factors. That's a whole separate business in itself. And because of that is why we reduced our transportation services. If you'd like a video about that, let me know, because I did a couple years ago make a video about operating a transportation service within your childcare business. But since that video, honestly, this school year, we made the decision to stop doing transportation to and from homes. So now we only do it to and from elementary schools, and that has provided great relief. If you want more info about that, leave a comment below. Number 12 is unreasonable parents. This is different than intimidating parents or having to tell parents no, because sometimes some parents just want to complain or need somebody to talk to, and there really is no issue or no specific request. It's just they're just unreasonable. I have no further explanation than that. You would just have to experience it to understand what I'm talking about. Those types of situations worried me because I am not the most I'm not the best at being like a people person, just conversationalist, especially when I have a bunch of things going on. I'm ready to get back to what I was doing, or when I was a director, like, oh, I have to go into this classroom, or I have to finish uploading this paperwork. And like, when I have something that I have to do, it is so hard for me to engage with someone that's being unreasonable. There are people that are gifted at that. I don't have that gift. I'm just going to be honest. And number 13, the mail. I used to worry about the mail. I used to worry about what was coming in the mail, if it was going to be bad news, if our payments from the county were going to show up on time. I used to look at the camera on the weekend sometimes and stalk the mailman to see what time the mail was dropped in the mailbox so I could leave my house and run over to the center and get the mail. It's just, I don't know how further to explain it, other than if you've ever operated in crisis mode and relied on certain information or payments coming through paper mail, you might understand. If you can relate, leave a comment below. That is all for my 13 reasons of why I have worried about things over the years. I do not make this video to discourage you from starting your childcare business or to give you more things to worry about. I just often get tons of questions from clients or subscribers in my comment section under my videos asking for information about like what it's like to run a childcare business or if it's a good business to get into. And I have over 100 videos on here about how to run a childcare business and my administrative practices or processes, procedures, policies, marketing strategies, things like that. But I figured, let me give you some real insight from a different perspective that you might want to consider if you are thinking about jumping into this industry. If you like this video, it would really help me out if you gave it a thumbs up. Check out any links that are in the description and make sure that you're subscribed so that you can be notified when I release my next video, which will be very soon. I will see you in that next one.